Perfect. Well, we'll make a start, guys. Obviously, conscious of the fact that it's late on a Monday afternoon or Monday evening, and appreciate you all making yourselves available and the change of time. So thank you for being involved. Welcome to the first session of 4 that we've got coming up for the Premier Cricket Coaches Conference for this year. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Nick Bills and I work within the Cricket Performance Department at Cricket New South Wales. Unfortunately, due to the current nature of the world around us at the moment, we're unable to get together as a group like we have in the past a couple of times. But we're hoping that what we've put together for you this evening and over the next 4 weeks will be of value to you as you start to plan the season ahead. If and when restrictions and everyone's time does permit, we will still look to see if we can get everyone together and have a barbecue and maybe a few beers, whether it's watching the cricket or at another time. So you can all get together, share a few war stories of Premier cricket eras gone past, and we might be able to tag a little bit of more professional development to that as well. I'm sure many of you already been preparing and planning for your pre-season coming up and an attack on the 2021 season. So appreciate you giving up some of your time tonight and over the next couple of weeks. And we hope that you'll be able to take something away from these sessions that you'll be able to adapt and implement into your programs for the coming years and years to come. As you would have seen in my email last week, the 4 sessions we've got coming up for you, I'll touch on them again. Tonight, we've got Tom Reddin, Head of Triple SM, Sports Science and Sports Medicine of Cricket New South Wales, who'll also be joined by Ross Herridge, who's the Senior Physical Performance Coach with the New South Wales Blues. They'll be giving their presentation on fitness benchmarking and fast bowler management. Obviously, it's a bit of a topic that comes up each and every year and is of interest to all clubs and coaches. And it'll be, no doubt, a very, very good presentation put together by both Tom and Ross. Next week, we've got John Menenti, head coach of the Aussie Women's Rugby Sevens and former coach of Eastwood Rugby Club and the Shute Shield, to give a presentation on connecting with players and building strong club culture. Monday, 20 July, we've got Premier Cricket Coaching a Player's Perspective, Adam Crosswaite and Jodie Hicks, who both should be familiar to you all. Adam's played, I think, 3 different states and 6, maybe 7 different Premier clubs, so a vast level of experience there. And Jodie Hicks, current Sixers WBBL player, and also, for those of you who may not be aware, also plays for the GWS Giants in the Women's AFL. So she's been kind enough to give up a bit of time to us as well in between all of that. And then the last session, Monday the 27th of July, someone who's probably familiar to nearly all Premier Cricket coaches here is Alan Mantle, and he'll be presenting on building self-belief and helping players out of the COVID-19 period. I'd like to thank the 4 Metro coach and talent specialists who would be familiar to most of you in helping plan, prepare and spread the word this evening, and they are Dean Burke, Alex Kemp, Josh Layla and Jay Lenton. And a bit of housekeeping before we get underway. Could I just ask him, just keep our cameras off and microphones off as the session is going. This will just help, obviously, to just reduce the lag time in between with Tommy's PowerPoint that he will be presenting, and also just stop the echo in the background when the microphones are on. We'll also, as you might have seen at the top of your screen there, this webinar, we will be recording it, and we'll also be sending it round to everyone on the list and keeping it there as a little resource tool if you want to come back, or any other coaches want to come back and have a look at it at another time. We'll be recording all 4 sessions, so if you do miss one along the way, we will be sending them through at the completion of that later in the week. You'll also have the opportunity to ask questions to both Tom and Ross towards the back end of the session. To do this, we're using an online tool called Slido. To ask a question, please visit the website www.slido, which is slido.com, and use the event code 84892. I have put all that information into the chat function or the conversation function that you'll find across the tab at the bottom there. So if you click on there and scroll up in between the names of people joining, you'll find the information to ask a question. And as we get to the back end, I will be asking Tom and Ross for those Before I do pass over to Tom and Ross, I'd just like to introduce them both to you. Obviously, Tom, as I mentioned, is the head of Triple SM Cricket New South Wales and has been in that role overseeing the Triple SM department for the past 4 years. He's also spent some time previously in another life as a senior strength and conditioning coach. I think that would have been in the mid-2010s or so, I think, Tommy. And has also worked in similar roles at Sydney Uni in AFL and Melbourne City FC in the A-League. So has a vast amount of experience and also expertise in this area. And some of you may not have seen him, but he's in his element when he's got players running up and down hills or running up and down doing shuttles in the gym. So great to have him on. And Ross is the senior physical performance coach with the New South Wales Blues and has been in that role for the past 2 seasons. Also works concurrently in the same role during the BBL seasons with the Sydney Sixers as well. Prior to that, Ross has worked as the head of S&C with Nottinghamshire County Cricket Club and also worked with the ECB. Again, similar to Tom, Ross has a wealth of expertise in helping players prepare and develop to ensure not only a high-level performance on the field, but also ensuring that players are capable of making it through a rigorous season. Obviously, Australian domestic cricket now, you've got 10 Shield games, hopefully 11, 7 or 8 one-day games, plus a 14 to 17 or 18 Big Bash season mixed in with some Premier cricket along the way. So ensuring that those players are up to scratch to be able to make it through that season is an arduous task. This season will also see a potential increase in the number of Blues and Breakers that will be playing in Premier cricket. For those of you who aren't aware, there will be no second 11 cricket this season. And we're also probably uncertain nature of what the Australian domestic schedule may look like. So there'll be a reliance on Premier cricket to help prepare players for playing, whether it be in the Shield, WNCL or the Big Bash. So we wanted to get Tom and Ross to speak to you all to help prepare your Premier players, but also how they go about preparing the elite players of the Blues and Breakers for their cricket season. So for now, I'll pass over to Tom. And please don't forget, if you've got any questions, visit the Slido website on your phone or your computer, and you'll be able to type them in there. Pass over to you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Billsy. As you can see, Billsy and I go to the same hairdresser. But Roscoe's got a very full set of hair, so not everyone at Cricket New South Wales has to have the shaved head. Look, some of you, I'm sure I would have met along the way, so it's great to connect again, but there'll be many of you that I haven't had the chance to meet previously, so it's great to meet you for the first time, albeit in these different sort of circumstances that we're facing. But it is a great opportunity to chat with you tonight, and when Billsy sort of floated the idea of chatting with the Premier coaches and administrators, the obvious one to sort of talk to at this point of the year was sort of things around, fitness and pace bowler build up as we return from off season, working towards hopefully the start of the season in the not too distant future. And really lucky tonight to have Ross join us. Ross is an outstanding strength and conditioning coach, as Billsy alluded to, and has had a massive impact at Cricket New South Wales in the 2 years he's been here, and really looking forward to Ross adding additional insights as we sort of talk through this presentation. So without further ado, I'll switch my camera off and we'll try and get this presentation up and running. Okay, Billsy, you'll probably have to confirm that for me. Has that come up okay, mate?
I've got that there, mate. All good.
Okay, great. So, yeah, the two topics for tonight are firstly fitness benchmarking, and hopefully some of you were sent recently some of the fitness benchmarks that we use at Cricket New South Wales to sort of guide our fitness program. So this will talk alongside that. And then secondly, fast bowler management. And to that, we're talking about the build-up from off-season as they return to match cricket, and then also in-season management and year-on-year management. And without trying to drill too much into detail, a lot of it will be about general principles and general concepts that we believe in to help us in that area. So we'll start with fitness benchmarking. And I guess it's always good to sort of link it to the why. And at Cricket New South Wales, certainly one of our objectives is to try and produce great cricketers. And what does a great cricketer have? Well, obviously they're really highly skilled. They can perform in all game formats, situations, conditions. They're really resilient. So I think Shane Warne said once that out of all the days that he had, maybe 51% were days where he felt like he won the day, and 49% was the other way. And for the world's best spin bowler of all time to have that ratio sort of shows you that in cricket there's probably more bad days than good on the whole. So players need to be really resilient. And then from a physical perspective, they need to be robust, which means that they're able to withstand the demands of a full season of cricket without breaking down. And they're also athletic. And the modern day cricketer is really athletic. I grew up, watching cricket in the 80s and loved that era. But the athleticism of the cricketers then, albeit that at that point it was probably, the best at that time. But compared to the modern day cricketer, it's almost chalk and cheese. So the modern day cricketer, particularly across all three formats, need to be really athletic. So from a physical perspective, it's really those bottom two that we're really trying to target to complement the work that the coaches are doing with the first three. Before I go into the benchmarks, Roscoe, is there anything you want to add around, I guess, the physical side of things from the modern day cricketer?
Not really, Tommy. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think from our element, or Triple SM, the two key ones are reducing the risk of injury and improving performance. There are two objectives, no matter how we look at it. So the two fundamental reasons we're here is to try and keep people on the park and improve performance. So, I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
One of the things we believe strongly in is this concept of building a fitness foundation with our players. And, I think that diagram there sort of summarises it well, that what we're trying to aim to achieve is on the left, which, is a player whose physical qualities, have that strong foundation to withstand the demands of modern cricket. And if those foundations aren't in place, then you put yourself in a position where you may have players break down, get injured, not perform well. And so the concept of this fitness foundation is certainly something we hold true. As you can see on that sort of photo on the left, there's these pillars that are going down into the ground to sort of really hold the foundation in place. And for us, we have these four pillars, if you like, that we believe to be the fitness foundation. So they are functional movement and coordinative skill. And functional movement is things like just general human movement. Can they squat, lunge, hinge, push, pull, twist, those basic fundamental human movements? Can they do those well? Speed, that's fairly self-explanatory. Power and strength, and then endurance. So for us, a well-rounded athlete will have all of those pillars in place. And if they do, then we're really confident that they'll be well set up to be a high-level cricketer. Roscoe, anything to add to that, mate?
No, mate. No, that's pretty good. It's pretty on the money.
What we'll do is we'll talk through each of those pillars and specifically what are some of the benchmarks that we follow. And again, really keen to just talk general principles and not get too caught up on the actual tests that we do, because there's a range of different tests you could do to assess each of these four areas. In Australian cricket, across the states. And with the national team, we're just going to talk through some of the assessments that we do, and they may be ones you're keen to do in your environment, or you may choose different assessments. But the principle is that these 4 pillars are things we're trying to improve, and we need assessments to help track progress. So what we use at Cricket New South Wales to measure the movement quality is a functional 5, and it's 5 different assessments. Overhead squat, which you can see here Jess performing, a single leg squat, left and right leg, so in effect it becomes 2, a walk lunge, and then a push-up and a chin-up test. So they give us 5 general movement patterns: squat, single leg squat, lunge, push and pull, that give us a really good assessment of the player's functional movement. And each of those assessments is scored from 0 to 3, with the better movement a higher score. And what we look for is that across the 6 total movements, because 2 with the single leg squat with the left and the right, can the player score at least 15 as a total? And if they can, then they'll get into the green. And what you'll see with our scoring system is that we just use a basic traffic light, red, yellow, green scoring system. And that, really captures nicely areas that players need to work on, or areas that players, have achieved that don't need to be addressed quite as much. So this is a really important, assessment and benchmark for us. And I mean, Roscoe, you jump in here, but I think any player who has aspirations to play at the highest level and withstand the demands of a modern cricket season, if they can't do these basic movements well, I think they're really going to struggle with the demands of the cricket season. Do you concur, Roscoe?
Yeah, I agree, mate. And I think they are very basic. And sort of the context to that is, like when you start doing dynamic movements such as running, or locomotive movements such as running or sprinting or changing direction, if you have dysfunction in your movement patterns, then that adds an increased demand on either the tissues or your energy systems. So dysfunction in your movement, it comes at a cost. And over the course of, days, weeks, months, years, especially, in cricket, which is such a volume-based sport, they can catch up and cause, or be factors towards injury. So as a foundation, we look for, especially our younger guys, as a general rule, we want them to move well and to be relatively fit and lean. And then all the other pillars that Tommy was talking about, your speed, power, strength, which are, the funky stuff that you end up actually seeing on the field in terms of some explosive movements, changing direction, some of the athletic fielding or whatever else, or the bowling. That stuff comes a bit later. But if you're trying to build an athlete from scratch and they can't move well, you have a bit of an uphill battle.
Yeah, great message there, Roscoe. And one of the things you can do is with your warm-ups is really try and use them as an opportunity to work on general movement. So, training warm-ups, even match day warm-ups, you can have a lot of these sort of lunging, squatting, hinging type movements that, done regularly over time will improve. We use, this set of 6 assessments
Apologies, everyone. I think so. We may have lost Tommy there. I'll give him a buzz. I'll see what we can do to get him back online. He is at Cricket New South Wales, so hopefully they haven't turned the power off him in the office. But we'll be back to you shortly.
I'm back, Billsy. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
No, you're all right, mate. They turned the power off you in the office, did they?
Yeah, they did actually. So anyway, I'm back. All right, let me quickly reshare again, and we'll see if we can't just keep rolling on. All right, how are you there?
Yeah, got you back, mate. Back
Okay,
on that screen again.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's one of the pillars. The other pillar, or the next pillar along, is speed, which particularly in the modern, cricket that's played, is a really important quality. So again, many ways you could measure that, but what we have in Australian cricket as our speed assessment is the run of 3. So it's a nice, I guess, specific assessment, given running between wickets is a big part of the game. The numbers down below can sort of provide a bit of a guide. Doing this with a stopwatch works really well. You just need 2 stopwatches because you have one measuring each run of 3 effort, and then you have another one which is measuring the 30-second cycle that it rolls through. But certainly, with the elite men, we're looking for under 10 seconds as a green benchmark for a single run of 3. The very best in this will get low 9s. And then with senior female players, the breakers, we're looking at under 10.5 as a green. So this is a really good speed assessment that can be done, at any indoor or outdoor cricket facility. Roscoe, do you want to talk about speed and the importance of it in cricket?
Yeah, so it's probably the when you look at how physical performance impacts cricket, there's plenty of different ways it does, but I think the way that shows itself to say, the average, the punter or whatever on telly is generally speed, whether it's, running between the wickets fast or, a fast bit of fielding, pick up, approaching the ball fast, picking it up and throwing at the stumps, or, like a, run and diving catch. And then obviously the speed that the guy's running to bowl, it gets up sort of late 20s, in terms of kilometers per hour. So speed is the game changer. Speed is what makes the difference from a physical aspect. If we, of course, skill and the technical side of things is just, paramount. But, from a physical aspect, speed is hugely important. And I think, when you see people like David Warner, who's obviously well renowned, well known for his sort of speed between the wickets and speed in the ring, it's those KPIs that we're looking to really instill in the players. It's the hardest thing to change and make improvements on. So it requires a lot of time, but it's certainly something we have a bit of a focus on. We make sure our guys move well and are fit, because that's our foundation. And then from there, we're trying to make our guys more dynamic, more athletic over short distances, and ultimately quicker. If you've got the guys who are quicker, even if we talk about the sub-maximal paces or sub-maximal speeds they run at, if your maximum velocity is faster, then everything else you do, even at the slower speeds is, is a smaller percentage of your maximum. So its crossover to other elements is also vital, but as I said, speed is probably the KPI that really stands out in the game as being important.
And I guess, Roscoe, particularly for the white ball cricket, and even more so for T20 cricket, that real speed is an asset for the player.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at the white ball stuff, games are won by small margins, so if you're quick between the wickets, and I know, Australia put got a big emphasis on that at the moment. If you're quick between the wickets, it could be the difference between Steve Smith being on strike or whoever, Dave Warner being on strike, or someone lower down the order. So for even those guys down the order, they need to be fast. They need to be quick between the wickets. They need to be good turners, because it could be something as little as getting someone on strike, but can have such a huge impact on the outcome of the game.
Yeah, great example. Okay, the next pillar then is power and strength. And for all, I guess, disciplines of cricket, batting, bowling, fielding, power and strength are really good qualities to have. So we assess it. What Jess is doing here is a vertical jump, which is a lower body power assessment. And so the benchmarks are shown there for the lower body power assessment. And then for upper body strength, we have the bench pull. And these numbers are how much can the player pull relative to their own body weight. So it's a relative rather than an absolute test. But again, this is just one example of tests that can be used to assess this particular area. There's other tests that you can use, but these are the ones that we use at state cricket and with the national level. So for players, I guess particularly who have aspirations to play at the top level, these are good benchmarks for them to work towards. Roscoe, anything to add around the power and strength benchmarks?
No, nothing there, mate. As I say, there, especially the strength is an underpinning quality. A lot of the research would suggest that strength training is one of the biggest indicators of reducing injury risk, or and it also underpins power. So your base level of strength will dictate how powerful you can be to an extent. So we all know those guys that are naturally really explosive, really powerful. But if you're not that guy or that girl, improving your strength is probably a really good place to start with trying to become more powerful, rather than just focus on trying to be more powerful from the outset, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Certainly what's been noticeable is the importance of this for the female formats of the game. So T20 cricket, clearly, hitting the ball to the boundary, sprinting in the field, throwing from the boundary when you're in the field. In the female game, strength and power is becoming increasingly important and increasingly seen as a differentiating quality in player selection, alongside obviously skill. And then the fourth pillar is endurance. And so the benchmark test that we use for this in cricket is the 2 kilometre time trial. It's also used in a lot of different football codes. The great advantage of the 2K time trial is that it needs very minimal equipment. It's really probably running 4 to 5 laps around the oval once it's been measured out, and you have a stopwatch and you're away. So the 2K time trial is a standard endurance test in cricket, Again, there's different tests you could use, beep test, yo-yo test, those sorts of things. But certainly we find the 2K test is a really good and simple assessment for that quality of endurance. And again, down below, you can see the benchmarks that are in place across Australian cricket. And certainly, again, if you have players in your clubs that are aspirational and want to play state cricket or higher, we'd certainly encourage that they use these benchmarks with their own training to sort of guide their progression. So that's basically the summary side. Again, bringing it back to the concept of a foundation and 4 key pillars in that fitness foundation. Movement quality is foundation 1, speed is foundation 2, or pillar 2, sorry. Power and strength is pillar 3, and endurance is as pillar 4. And so we have a range of different assessments to measure players' performance in those pillars, and players that maybe aren't doing well in a pillar, well, that will become an area for focus because very much the objective is to get all 4 pillars in place and all 4 pillars nice and strong. As I said, you can use other tests to assess these fitness qualities. These are just the ones that Australian cricket uses, but there are other ones out there. Don't be too caught up on the actual test itself. It's more about assessing that particular pillar of fitness. And again, bring it back to that concept that we want to build a really strong fitness foundation with our player, and that's what pre-season is partly about, so that we can set them up for success for the season rather than having a wonky foundation. Roscoe, do you want to wrap up that part there?
Yeah, just in agreement with Tommy there. If you are very time constrained with what you can do, then focus on making people move better and probably the speed element, because that's going to have the biggest impact on game day per se. However, if you've got more time and there's a little bit more structure and you can have a bit more of a development block, then work almost through making your guys fit, making them move well, making them fit, make sure they are relatively lean, and then build on those other qualities such as your strength, speed, and power. And then obviously, of course, that's a better outcome. But as we know, teams or people are constrained by a number of different things. So build that solid foundation, and then that will set up individuals for greater success.
Yeah, well said, mate. Billsy, is it a chance now to sort of take some questions around this area before we move into the pace bowler management? Any of the guys have questions for Roscoe or myself?
One of the ones we do have in there, mate, it's not directed to either of you two, but whoever wants to jump in, feel free. It's obviously the 4 fitness pillars you've just spoken about. Do you prioritise, obviously, batters, bowlers, wicket keepers? Are any of them more a priority than others, depending on what skill set that player may have? Or do you just try and balance all 4 across all players? Obviously, the pointy end is probably more so. You can try to target one of those specific pillars over the other. But are there any that are more specific to a certain skill set within the game?
I mean, Roscoe, I might hand to you for a sec about that, but certainly just from me, in our pathway players and our younger players, we would target all 4 pillars equally. We want a player to come out of the junior system, with a really rounded fitness foundation. But then when they go up to Roscoe with the senior teams, I'm sure there's probably going to be some more specific focus points. Roscoe, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, like Tommy says, we focus on all areas with the youngsters. We're trying to make, as guys come through the pathway, we want them to be as durable and dynamic as we can be. I suppose when they get up to sort of blues level, you kind of, they're a bit older, they're a bit more mature, things are a bit more difficult to change. So you've got to work on focus areas. Without going off onto a bit of a tangent, ultimately we would do our fitness testing battery and see where they're weak and focus on that. But in terms of, position specific, it would be hard to argue that not every position needs each of it, but you might target it slightly differently. So, for example, with our batters, we'd have a lot more emphasis on shorter sprint stuff, 17 meters or whatever it is between the wickets. So, that's the sort of distance, sort of up to 20 meters we're really focusing on, with a real emphasis as well on the ability to change direction. Because that's a key component of their game. For keepers, there's a lot more focus on being explosive, powerful, and quick on obviously laterally, and very short distances. And then for the quicks, they need a bit of everything. But ultimately, for when they run into bowl, they get up to 26, 27 k's an hour. The fast guys, so making sure that they have the endurance at those sort of speeds. It's all well and good being able to hit that kind of speed in your run up, but if you do it and your intensity or your quality of movement drops when you get to those speeds, and after you've bowled a certain amount of overs, say 5 to 10 overs, you start fatiguing and your run up speed gets a bit slower, or your movement mechanics start getting worse, and you're a longer format bowler, then that's problematic. So, we need to focus on all areas, but ultimately, it's kind of specific in the sense of, right, for the quicks, the run up is really important. So we'll work out what their speed is, what their optimal run up speed is, and we'll make sure that they're durable at that speed. For the batters, it's shorter stuff and it's change of direction and running between the wickets as the primary focus. This doesn't mean we don't focus on the other stuff, but as a primary focus. And then obviously for keepers, you've got to be explosive out of that squat position, especially laterally and over a couple of meters, forward and back. So that's sort of how we would, as a general rule, that's how we would start to specify stuff.
And Roscoe, would it be fair to say, I mean, the most physically demanding position in cricket is the fast bowler. Would it be fair to say that, those 4 pillars, we almost want those 4 pillars, the biggest, the most well-developed of all players in the fast bowlers as a result of the highest physical demands that they face?
Yeah, absolutely, Tommy. I think the more and more, the way the game's going as well, like you can't get away without being athletic and trying to bowl really fast consistently. So, we all know players and this is again, conversation off piste, but we all know players that can perform that aren't in the best physical shape in cricket. We've seen it around the world. But I think as the game continues to progress, there continues to be more fixtures in the calendar for the players, and the demand for pace around the world gets, or continues to be as strong as it is. Being athletic is paramount to that.
Yeah, good point, mate. Billsy, any other questions on the fitness benchmarking before we move into the second part?
No, not at the moment, mate. Thank you though for that.
That's right. Well, I think we sent around the fitness benchmarks, I think, to all the Premier clubs a few weeks ago. So hopefully everyone's got a copy of those, and feel free to reach out to Ross or myself or any of the team if you have any follow-up questions around those benchmarks. We'd be only happy to help answer the questions. All right, so we'll move on to the second part, which is fast bowler management. And again, when you return from off season, this is a key area of focus for all of us, because we know the important role that fast bowlers play. And we also know that they're probably the most at risk of injury. Certainly the statistics would suggest that. I think long-term statistics for fast bowlers is generally around 20% are injured as a general rule. So clearly that's a high number. So, fast bowler management is an important area. So what we're going to sort of touch on is firstly, understanding the physical demands of fast bowlers, and then look at the build-up from off-season, which most of us are in at the moment, is just returning from off-season. So then how do we build up from that point towards the first rounds of the season? Thirdly, then in-season management, and then finally season-on-season management. And again, Ross will provide some excellent insights here in his role, being actively involved in fast bowler management with the Blues and the Sixers players. We'll just touch on firstly the physical demands of fast bowling, and one of the good things about modern technology is it has allowed us to sort of better quantify the physical demands of fast bowling. So things like GPS, so forth, allows us to better understand, well, what does a fast bowler do? What forces do they experience? How much do they run, and so forth? And it is worth recognising that fast bowling is a skill with very high physical demands. It requires coordination, speed, power, force production and absorption, endurance. So all those qualities that Ross talked to before. Across a day's play, a fast bowler can bowl anywhere up to 30 overs. And what that means is that 180 times in the day they're running in really hard and giving a close to maximal effort ball release at the end of that 25-metre run-up. And they can cover somewhere between 15 to 20 kilometres in a single day. And if it's 4-day cricket and you're stuck in the field for multiple days, then that can really start to clock up. Of that 15 to 20 kilometres, we're looking at about 2,000 metres as being sprinting distance. And typically, the fast bowlers will reach somewhere around 30 to 32 kilometres an hour as a peak speed across the course of that day. At ball release and at impact with delivery, they've got 8 to 10 times body weight of force going through their body. So that's a lot of force going through their ankles, knees and hips and up through their spine. And as per the last dot point there's very high loads on tissues and structures of the body, such as bones, tendons, ligaments and muscles. There was an article a year or so ago that sort of talked to some of this. The Redbacks released some of their GPS data, and it was fascinating to see some of the numbers involved. Chad Sayers covered 23 kilometres, on one day, and that was a 40-degree day of the Sheffield Shield final against Victoria, and over 3 kilometres at high intensity. And that contrasts with, say, an AFL match where players typically around 14 kilometres with just under 1,000 of high-speed metres. So I think it really gives us the context that fast bowling at the top level is extremely physically demanding, probably even more so than what we previously considered. And as a result, players need to be fit, they need to be appropriately managed, and just we need to respect the physical demands that they're going to be undergoing. Roscoe, you'd know this better than most, of course. Have you got anything to add on the physical demands of fast bowling from your experience?
Just the two bits I'd add to that, mate, is the workload management side of it is really, really important. And the thing is with fast bowling is the number one injury that is really common within their ranks is stress fractures. Now, if you get a full-blown stressor, you're talking a year out. So that's a huge amount of time to be missing. It's a whole, in terms of development or performance or improvement or, whatever, we're getting out of that player, from a state level. That's a huge amount of time. So we've got to treat these guys, we've got to make sure they're physically up to the demands, which at times means exposing them to high load, and at times it means making sure they're not overloaded. So it works both ways, because I always talk about fast bowler management as, you've got a glass of water, or and we want to make sure that glass is really full up but not overflowing. So at least 3/4 of the way. And if we use the analogy of, that cup of water are overs or deliveries, you're almost as at risk of, if you're under bowling your guys for the demands of whatever they need. So for state level, we know roughly how many overs they need to be bowling per game, per week, per year. You're as nearly as high a risk of under bowling you guys as you are over bowling. So getting the balance of making sure your glass is full enough without overfilling the glass is the real art, and it's the $1 million question, really. So yeah, it's hugely important. And the other thing that I always tell our players, and not too many people can come back to me with a different answer, is, in sport, it's got to be one of the most brutal movements across all sports. If you take away, the random, nature of, say, getting hit in rugby and potentially gymnastics, I don't think there are many worse things for your body than pace bowling. So I think within the world of cricket, I think it gets the respect, but I think it doesn't get the respect it deserves across sport for how physically demanding pace bowling actually is.
Yeah, well said. And I think, the numbers sort of justify why that fitness foundation needs to be so solid. That we were talking before about, players having those 4 pillars of good movement, good strength and power, good endurance, and good speed. The physical demands that the player has to go under means they really need a strong foundation. All right, so we'll talk firstly about the build-up from off-season. And again, I guess I'm going to focus on just some general principles and that we sort of follow. There's no sort of one-size-fits-all approach to things, of course, but these are just some general principles that we would hold to be true. So firstly, beginning bowling week 1 of pre-season. And why is that? Well, it allows us then to have the most gradual build-up of loading. So we don't have to fast track at the very end of a pre-season. We can really gradually build up the bowler and the tissue and the bone in a nice, slow, steady, safe manner. Initially, sort of 2 to 3 times a week, and avoiding back-to-back bowling days early on while the bone sort of going through its process of regenerating after each bowling session. We try and give it that full 48 hours between bowling sessions. Starting off a few steps. So we've got a little bit of footage here of Hazel. So that's really first bowl from back from off season. He's not charging in off the full run. It's step 1 is a few steps, and then gradually building that up over a course of 4 to 5 weeks, going from that to say quarter run up for a week of that, and then maybe a week at half run up, and then a week at 3/4 run up. So really working through say 4 or 5 different stages before getting to bat v bowl against batters. And again, that just allows that gradual build-up of intensity so that the bones, particularly in the spine, can properly condition and not sort of be compromised and at risk of breaking early. After that sort of 4 to 5 weeks of build-up, then bowling to batters, and you're looking at somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks at batters at training before matches, depending on the format. If it's short, T20 cricket you're preparing for, that could probably be a bit tighter, but generally for long form cricket, you'd certainly be looking at that length of time at training before matches. and sort of working towards, a 4-week average of somewhere around 120 to 140 balls a week is a general, I guess, base target to have before the first round of matches. Roscoe, I might throw to you. You're certainly well across this, mate, and you've certainly had big influence on us in terms of some of these principles. Do you want to talk further about any of that?
I think you covered it quite well, Tommy. I think the thing is we're always trying to look at physical preparation from a skill perspective, but also reducing the risk of injury. Now, the two that we're realistically looking at specifically are, from a longer format point of view, we're looking at stress fractures. So bones are always going through a process of remodeling. So they take impact, they remodel, they react to the stimulus, whether that's bowling or whatever else. And then if the rate doesn't change drastically over a short time, it remodels in the right way and it continues this ongoing process. It's when load changes exponentially or load change, the frequency of load increases, that we become at risk. So we started bowling the guys earlier, whether it's either like Tommy said there, off a few steps and just building up the impact from a very small gentle load and then increasing that slightly. I think we'll talk about it a bit more in a bit, but ultimately the changes in load or fast changes in load are when players are at risk. So as we transition from out of season to in season, as we get to the end of the first block going into BBL, and then obviously the back half of the year. So part of the bowling philosophy is making sure we're not having too big undulations or spikes in load. So it's almost consistency, little and often, with our bowling to negate that aspect. And then the other aspect, from a white ball perspective, side strains are our biggest risk early on, because generally, with only 4 overs maximum to bowl, you've got variations like slower balls and Yorkers, which actually take quite a heavy toll on your sides, your obliques. There are big risk factors for injury when we're talking about white ball cricket. So, when we transition from off-season training to white ball cricket, or from red ball cricket to white ball cricket, that's our biggest risk factor. So the build-up and making sure we're getting that correct from a load aspect, but also that skill aspect of, changing from red ball bowling to white ball bowling is really, really crucial.
Excellent. So that, there might be some ideas there that might fit with your own pre-seasons as you start to ramp up from off-season. Obviously, each program will be different. I think the concept Ross has talked to there about gradual progression and trying to start early with the bowling so that you can build up slowly rather than starting late and having to fast cook the fast bowler at the end of pre-season is one to certainly consider. Then if we transition into in-season management, again, just talking broadly about some general principles. So we utilise across our programs some general loading rules, and this is very, again, general. Individual players will have different programs, and Ross can talk to that. But as a general principle, we like the sort of 2-4-6 rule. It's a nice, easy one to remember, which is no more than 2 days bowling in a row, no more 4 days bowling in a week, and up to 6 overs in any single spell before a break. Now, obviously, there'll be times where that won't be able to be followed. That happens, but as a general principle to follow, the 2-4-6 has some decent backing behind it as a way of keeping the bowlers bowling regularly and not, as Roscoe said, tipping over the glass in terms of overfilling it. Now, for younger and physically underdeveloped bowlers, so maybe some of the pace bowlers who don't have that fitness foundation in place, then that may actually be reduced to sort of a 1-3-5 model. as a general principle to follow to keep the player on the park and stay healthy, whilst also bowling enough for skill development and to perform. If a large loading spike occurs in season, so for whatever reason, if they had to bowl a lot more than normal, and our definition of a large spike might be 50% more than normal, then we'd look to try and actively deload that player in the following 7 to 10 days. Now, that deload doesn't mean that they don't bowl necessarily. It means that maybe they have less bowling at training, or they do less intensive bowling at training. So maybe they do a bit more of 4, 5, 6 half run up type bowling, and less full run up at training, as part of just a planned deload to help freshen the player after a big spike. And then across a full season, which goes from, say, end of September to end of March, roughly 6 months, we'll try and plan in 1 to 2 times where there'll be a full week of no bowling to really give a full chance to heal and regenerate, and then you can get back on the horse and go again. Roscoe, from you, anything to sort of add, any further insights on in-season management?
No, that's good, Tommy. I think hitting the nail on the head there. Just be aware of your schedule. I think that's the crucial thing. You know when your big games are going to be, when your big weekends are going to be, or where your dense fixture blocks are going to be. So it's just being aware of that and understanding how that might impact your training around it.
Yeah, exactly. And for the Premier Cricket players who are in the pathway, I guess that large loading spike will happen around the national championships, particularly for the pace bowlers who end up playing, a fair chunk of that national championship. So that's where, following the national championships, we'll all be looking to, give them that 7 to 10 day, safe deload before restarting them up again and having them go on their way. What you can see there on the screen is a graph of the bowling loads of a Blues player, and hopefully it sort of shows nicely the build up that happens across a pre-season, working towards that sort of 120 to 140 4-week average. The 4-week average is shown in blue, and the single week on week bowling volume is shown in the red. And in season, again, hopefully what you can see is that whenever there's been a fairly solid jump up in bowling volume, there's been a sort of a deliberate attempt to freshen the bowler up after that. So bigger spike, deload, bigger spike, deload, full deload here in and around Christmas, which works really nicely. And then through the second part of the season, again, whenever there's been a fairly decent spike in load, you can see that the red is well above the blue. Then we're trying to follow that with a planned deload, and the player can continue through the season accordingly. Roscoe, do you want to talk to that from your side in terms of how you manage those deloads?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way the season runs in Australia, we get the BBL in the middle part, which from when we talk about the types of injury, from a stress fracture injury and the type of injuries that come from high workload, we get that natural deload. I'm not quite sure which player this is, but you can see sort of as we go from November to December when that will typically be, there is a natural deload, but ultimately, I think when we get in season and when we get in the thick of the season and we're talking about the players that are playing week in, week out, the bread and butter is the games. We need to make sure that they are fresh and well prepared for the fixtures, and then around that, that's where we make our changes. So, if we have a game on a flatty and our bowlers have bowled a lot, then by the end of the game, generally they'll be pretty beat up if it's been like quite a like it's gone all 4 days and it's been quite a grind. So then that following week might be a really light week. Well, certainly in the first half of the week, it's more about making sure they feel recovered, making sure their, body's not overly stiff or they're not overly fatigued. And then the back half of the week again becomes the reload and the preparation for the fixture. So again, around our busy periods, that's a big part of what we're looking to do, just to make sure, as Tommy said, that red line, which is our day-to-day bowling, that red line isn't consistently. There's not a wide chunk of a red block above the blue line, and they're only guides, and it's different for each player. But as a general rule, and especially with your grade cricketers, that's what we're looking to do. Yeah.
And Roscoe, interested in, match on Saturday, match on the following Saturday, and the bowlers, down to bowl both of those Saturdays. How would, if they've got 2 training sessions, let's say Tuesday, Thursday planned in between those 2 Saturdays, how would you sort of go about, differentiating on the Tuesday and the Thursday? Would you have them the same? Would one be a little bit lighter than the other? How would you look to plan out your 2 training bowls?
Yeah, well, in that scenario, in an ideal world, what we want to do is we want to get to the point where we don't have to modify them at all. But for the sake of this conversation, let's say they've had a really an exponentially big game on the Saturday, or they've had a couple of Saturday, Sunday game or whatever, and they've bowled a lot and they're really stiff and sore. Your Tuesdays would be your day to really modify. So Sunday off, or if it's a double game, Monday off, or at least both the days off, and then your Tuesday is just about probably an extension of the recovery, so almost active recovery. So you may look to they may look to bowl on the Tuesday, but to be quite a low intensity and just turn their arm over and just get the joints working, and bowling such a unique movement pattern, just making sure that they're getting through their action and almost relimbering their body up and getting some extra stiffness out. I think the worst thing that a player can do in terms of recovery is do nothing and just couch potato. I think you always feel worse after that. So making sure they're doing something on the Tuesday and something specific to the bowling action, whether it's just some drill work or low intensity bowling, I think that will help them recover better for the game than not training or not bowling. So, as long as they're injury free, I think that would be the smart play to do. And then Thursday, hopefully that helps them recover a bit faster and feel a bit fresher for the Thursday, which then in an ideal world is do what you need to do to perform on the Saturday coming. So they've got a big game coming on the Saturday. If they feel really good and they don't want to, they don't have to bowl. But if they need to bowl and whatever they need to feel right for the Saturday, they're able to do that on the Thursday. So what we don't want to do is get ahead of ourselves or overcook the chicken and Tuesday go in and try and have a big bowl or have a decent training session, and then Thursday they're actually stiff and sore and they're cooked. And they almost have to do less on the Thursday going into the Saturday game. That would be, to my mind, that would be suboptimal. So I think if you've got that scenario, the Tuesday is the day where you're looking to modify stuff and modify intensity, but not doing anything. And then the Thursday is, do what you need to do to perform on the Saturday.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. All right. So finally, season on season management. And again, just some general principles. Certainly at the forefront of that would be long-term athlete development. And that's about sort of planning out, what do we expect from a 19, 20-year-old pace bowler versus a 25, 26, 27-year-old pace bowler versus, a 32, 33-year-old pace bowler. And just, I guess, recognising that they are going to be different in terms of probably the fitness foundation. The 25, 26-year-old is probably going to have a better foundation than the 19-year-old. And certainly from a bone perspective, the 19-year-old is going to have bones that are still growing and still developing and aren't fully formed, versus the 25, 26-year-old is going to have, really strong, fully developed bones. And so it's not an apples and apples situation. Again, the link with the Fitness Foundation, generally what we see is that our younger players are still, I guess, growing into their body, so they don't have that movement quality, they won't have the strength and even the endurance that 25, 26-year-olds. So their foundation isn't as solid, and therefore we shouldn't be looking to expose them to the same demands as someone the 25, 26-year-old with the really well-developed fitness foundation. And then the third principle there is around the importance of the off-season. So it is important to have an off-season. And again, Roscoe, I'll throw to you in a second, but certainly from a mentally and both mentally and physically, the off-season is important. Roscoe, do you want to talk about the importance of the off-season in the concept of season-on-season management?
Yeah, so again, it'd be potentially different for sort of grade cricketers, but certainly from a Blues aspect, we're looking at, if we've got a young bowler, we're looking at them to play for the Blues as soon as they're ready, as soon as possible, and then go on and represent Australia. So the next game is not necessarily the most important game, especially for those younger guys. So we've got to take a more long-term approach, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. History, and we've got the data now to show that bowlers of certain ages in the professional game generally can handle X amount of overs. They can handle a number of overs, and we're always trying to push that boundary. And year on year, we're trying to get our guys to bowl more and more and more, because the more you can bowl and not get injured, the better that sets you up moving forward, both from a physical aspect and obviously a skill development and technical aspect. So, year on year, we're looking to do that. And a big part of that is that ability to deload and allow that remodeling process that I spoke about earlier, allow the bones to do what they need to do, harden up, become firmer, become stronger after the season. Now, if we look at a Sheffield Shield season, the back half of the year, they'll play generally 4 games plus a final. So there's a decent amount of load there. So they've had in terms of overs bowled, they've probably had a bit of a deload during the BBL, and then they've come up, and if we're playing well and we've done well, we're playing in the final, and you play 5 games, which is a healthy amount of load. And then from there, that deload period, which is the first time they've had a real deload, and I've got quotation marks up in my hands while I'm saying this. It's the first deload they've had since 12 months prior. It just allows that body to we call it super compensate or develop and recover and mature a little bit more without the rigors of fast bowling to have to deal with. So when we're looking at developing a youth fast bowler to represent the Blues, hopefully in his early 20s, probably more realistically a little bit older than that, those off-season periods are really, really key. And it doesn't mean you don't still work on the physical qualities or some of the other, technical aspects of the game, but it just allows your body to recover from the vigors of what you've just done over the last, 6, 8, 12 months. Yeah, very important.
Yeah, excellent. So what I just wanted to show, this is one of the pathway players, and I think it's just really useful to sort of see, switch off you can sort of see the movement quality here with the player. So this is a young 17 or so age pace bowler. And we're just taking him through a couple of really basic movement patterns, overhead squat, single leg squat. And you can just see that the foundation there isn't really strong at this point. He's still young and still developing, but clearly this isn't a foundation that we can look to try and load a lot with at the moment. We need to build the foundation. We need to be patient, and then hopefully over time we can progressively load it. And at some point, as Ross said, maybe in his early to mid 20s, he might be ready for professional domestic cricket season. But I think that really captures nicely, what we're dealing with with an underage or young player, is that they just don't have that movement and strength foundation as a general rule. There'll always be exceptions, but it's probably more often the rule rather than the exception. As Roscoe said, one of the things we sort of got better at understanding is that there's this sort of life cycle for fast bowlers. So they go through these stages. Stage one is that sort of under 17, under 19, like the player we just looked at. And, statistics would show that what we should be expecting of that player is around about somewhere between 170 to 250 match balls in a calendar year. And then that progresses, 19 to 22, working up towards 350 overs. Stage 3 performing that 23 to 25, 5 match overs in a calendar year, and then excellence, which is when we're really, I guess, expecting them to play for Australia, hopefully. Then they're bowling anywhere between 500 to 750 match overs in a calendar year. And that's certainly, where guys like Cummins and Stark and those guys are in that bracket. And then even after that, there's still certainly a role that the older pace bowler can play. Now at that point, probably some of their foundations are starting to wear away a little bit because of bones and joints, so on, getting a little bit bashed up. So again, you're sort of not expecting the same output from a pace bowler in that bracket, but they can still play a really important role in the context of a squad. And the mentor title there sort of reflects that they'll be playing an important role in bringing along the next generation, the sort of stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 players that are working through. And again, it's no hard and fast rule, but it's good to have a bit of a sort of map, a roadmap there in terms of where will those match overs come. So, the stage 1 player, looking that they'll probably get those match overs through Premier Cricket and underage national championships. The stage 2 player in the state squad, Premier Cricket, maybe with some exposure to BBL, Marsh Cup, second 11, and possibly a couple of Shield games. And then at stage 3, we're expecting they'll be, embedded within the first team, hopefully, and playing majority of the Shield, BBL, Marsh Cup, and then some Premier Cricket when the schedule allows. Obviously, the national team, they're getting all that through the international schedule, which is very hectic, and they'll knock off those overs easily enough in the cricket, potentially with some domestic cricket if it allows. And then in the mentor category, just a reduction in the volume of cricket, with sort of plus or minus with Premier Cricket at that point, and second 11, and hopefully still playing a few Shield games along the way. So that's again, it's not a set rule in stone, but it's certainly what history would sort of tell us is a good sort of roadmap for a fast bowler when they come into the professional system, is that they go through these stages, and we should expect X amount of match overs roughly from that player at any point in their development. And if we try and, I'll go back one. If we try and get, this output, 500 to 750 off a player in this age bracket, we're probably getting a mismatch of load to foundation, and we'll probably get a broken player. Roscoe, any additional thoughts to add into that?
Yeah, just like I said earlier, in terms of making sure the glass is as full as we can, within those different stages, in an ideal world, we want the guys pushing that 250 barrier, stage 2, 350 barrier rather than the lower end. There are a number of different factors which affect that. But ultimately, what we're trying to do, that's the overarching aim. And hopefully in 10, 15 years, that 250 at stage one is, 300 and so on further up the chain. So that's the aim. I'm trying to keep the glass as full as we can. And that obviously speeds up the development for each player.
And there's a lot of planning that happens around, and Roscoe's involved in this together with, the bowling coach, Andre Adams, and Phil Jakes and Freddie as the talent manager, in terms of trying to map out where those balls will happen across, all the different competitions that the player can be involved in. And obviously Premier Cricket plays a really important role in that, alongside the Shield and the Marsh Cup 50 over cricket, the BBL, second 11 cricket. There's all these different formats that, are important to help provide the opportunity to bowl the overs that need to be bowled for the player to get better and stronger. And Ross does a great job in sort of, summarising all that and helping to work out, okay, should the player be available, to play at the moment? Should they be managed a bit? That's a core part of his role. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I really want to acknowledge, Ross's contribution, a lot of those concepts and principles alongside his contribution tonight. The other physical performance coaches, Nathan and Sean, who played a big role in helping with benchmarks and the assessments. Andre, as the New South Wales pace bowling coach, has had a big impact here and helped with a lot of the principles. And then Kieran and Dan as two of the physios involved in our setup, who've additionally had a lot of input into some of the concepts, particularly around the fast bowler life cycle and so forth. So that pretty much covers it, Billsy. Again, happy to take between Ross and myself any questions from the floor at this point.
Thank you, Tommy, and thank you, Roscoe. I guess one of the ones we've got come in, and Ross, you were talking about it before, obviously how you'd potentially balance some recovery if a heavy day on a Saturday, looking towards obviously a match the next Saturday. One of the questions we've got come in over the last couple of years, certainly in men's Premier Cricket and first grade, there's been an increase in Saturday, Sunday. And that's not Saturday, Sunday, 2-day cricket. That's play, potentially bowl all day Saturday and in the field, and then have to back up for 1 or 2 T20s or a one-day match on a Sunday. Is there anything in particular that a player, a fast bowler can do, or even a batter, if they've gone out and scored 100, they can look to do to help themselves back up 2 days in a row and have to bat and bowl and field again on the Sunday?
Yeah, good question. In terms of recovery, the two things I say for me, number one thing you can probably do is stay off the piss on the Saturday night, which is probably difficult if you've had a good day. Make sure you get some good food on board, and make sure you get a good night's sleep. I think one of the there's a lot of information out on recovery at the moment on social media and whatever else, and there are a lot of gimmicks. And what doesn't always sell to everyone is, sleep is your best mode of recovery. It's when the body does all its recovery. So getting good night's sleep, what affects a good night's sleep, things like caffeine, things like alcohol, things like staying up late watching TV, etc., etc. So getting a good night's sleep and getting good food on board are number one. That's paramount. If you did nothing else, they would be the two things. In terms of all the, the bells and whistles around it that can happen from recovery, don't force. I suppose the key one for me is don't force someone to do something they don't want to do, because that's a stress. And if it's a stress, that's impacting recovery. So, the big talking point a lot of the times is ice baths and should or shouldn't you ice bath. And, even with our boys, and it would hold true for Premier Cricket players as well, If you like ice baths and you think they're helpful for you and you've got that available, then use it. But if you hate them, don't use it, because that's a stress. So what do you like doing as an individual? You know, we've got a lot of guys that like the sea, so I'm all for getting guys in the sea. But whatever those little bells and whistles are around the outside, whatever's helpful for you, there are Theraguns out there, massage guns out there, you know, other things like that. That's really important you do. As much for your mental recovery as your physical recovery. But yeah, number one and number two is good night's sleep and good food.
Perfect. Thank you, mate. And I guess the last one, the one other one we've got there, and obviously I'm cognizant of the time that you two have given and the coaches have spent on the line. So the last one I'll ask tonight is, with players and across obviously men's and women's cricket, they usually, and this is your weekend warrior grade cricket, playing anywhere probably grades 1 to 5, only training once or twice a week with their club. Some of that stuff you talk about working in the extra running or extra strength sessions. Would you look to work any of that into sessions they may be bowling as well? Or would you be encouraging those players to try and do some of that extra training, the S&C side of it, away from the sessions they're doing at bowling? And I guess this is looking at a fast bowler, not trying to double up and double dip on training sessions in terms of trying to balance themselves throughout a season.
Do you want to take that one, Roscoe?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah, it's a good. I think if you've got 2 training sessions a week, skills have always got to take priority. You've got to make sure that you're getting what you need from a skill aspect, skill development point of view. So, from a Blues perspective, we're big on big days and light days. I suppose it's not a short answer, but ultimately you've got to do what works within your environment and your constraints. If you are tight for time, then you know, in terms of your skill sessions, then definitely try and do your physical work on your other days. So, you know, let's, for the sake of this conversation, they have a Saturday, Sunday game. So Monday's off. Tuesday might be, you know, light skills. Wednesday might be a big physical day, when they're able to get some of the extra work they need to. You might top a little bit of running into the Thursday session, and then Friday might be a complete rest day and just a focus on the Saturday fixture. So, you know, the other way to do it is obviously go big day, light day. So Tuesday, do your skills. Can you incorporate some running? Can you incorporate either before training or after training? As long as, you know, there's a bit of a gap, you know, can you do your strength work on those days? And then allow your other days to be recovery days, because ultimately I think cricket is a big day, light day kind of sport. You know, you're either in the field all day, every day, or you've got your feet up, you know, unless you're batting. So yeah, we try and replicate that sort of motion with our training schedule where possible. But again, it very much varies on, you know, your time constraints really.
No, perfect. Thank you, Roscoe, mate. And just in regard to any further questions, if anyone does have any, as Tom mentioned throughout, both Tom and Ross would be happy to take them, or you can either email both Tom and Ross. Their emails are at the bottom of the slides there. Oh, man ahead of you, Tom. There, Tommy, well done. Thank you, mate, at the bottom of the screen. And they're both more than willing, and we thank them on behalf of the coach and talent specialists and Cricket New South Wales for willing to give up some of their time, obviously, tonight, and to answer any further questions you may have. So, obviously, just wanting to close off, I'll flick my screen back on there. So, we're just, on behalf of everyone at Cricket New South Wales, the coach and talent specialists and cricket performance, just want to thank Tom and Ross for their time this evening. It is very much appreciated. And obviously, as I said, any further questions you've got, feel free. Either you can flick them to me or one of the cats that you're in contact with, or with Tom, and we'll make sure that we get you an answer as soon as possible. Obviously, next week, we've got another session coming up with John Manenti, the head coach of the Aussie Women's Sevens program. That session will start at 6 p.m, but I'll have more details to you by the end of the week with that session and the link to be able to join. Thanks to everyone who's joined this evening and for your questions. It's very much appreciated. And obviously helps strengthen the session. And just a reminder that these sessions obviously open to all coaches at your Premier club. So please feel free. The Rego link will stay open for the rest of this week and probably throughout the month with these sessions. So feel free to send the link off to any assistant coaches you may have. Obviously, might be some changes to the guard over the next couple of weeks. So please feel free to let anyone you feel might benefit from these sessions, the registration link. If they've got any issues, please send them my way and I can help get them to register. Thank you again for your time this evening, and we look forward to catching up with you next week. Appreciate the time. Good night.
Thanks, Billsy. Thanks for the opportunity, mate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy.
Appreciate it.